first thing we should probably talk about is the COVID stimulus plan that went through Congress today. So I think we should talk about that because a lot of people are getting upset. They're getting a little riled up about with the Democrats, which the Democratic Party deserves all the criticism in the world. I'm not a cheerleader, but they're getting criticized for not moving forward the stimulus checks fast enough. Personally, I think any critique that the $1,400 is not $2,000 just because we all just got $600 and 14 plus 600. Just give us $2,000, Joe Biden. That's what Warnock and Ossoff ran on in Georgia. Just the full stop. Make it $2,000. Okay, it's silly. It's silly that we even have to say that. It has to be an argument. The constant need for the Democrats to constantly hedge their bets and back off of their own positions is embarrassing. Frankly, it's embarrassing. Just being a little bit bold. Biden has already impressed people by being bold and progressive in certain areas. That this one really important thing, we saw that Trump got a big boost from his stimulus, the $1,200 that he let out. I don't see why Biden wouldn't do the politically intelligent thing and just send out the checks. There's already supposedly some centrist Dems who are thinking of reducing the income of people who get this, but this income is based off of 2019. Doesn't make sense. It kind of shows the banality and cruelness of means testing. I think a lot of us can agree. But let's get into the weeds a little bit. I just wanted to give that really quick off the bat so we understand that's where I stand on the $1,400. So that when I mention $1,400 from now, I'm not going to have anybody later come and go, how come you didn't mention blah, 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 right? Let's just get that out of the way. All right. So check this out. This is in the Post. House approves budget plan as President Biden emphasizes willingness to approve stimulus without GOP votes. So Biden already met with the Republicans at the White House, the ones that were offering just a pittance of a stimulus bill, just to give this appearance that he was, trying to do a little bipartisanship. But the Republicans, really, they're just playing fast and loose. They're just trying to. I think Biden was appearing like he was trying to do bipartisanship when he really had no interest in it. And I think the GOP, the Republicans, were doing the same thing. They really didn't have an interest in meeting Joe Biden halfway. Their proposal was a joke, frankly. So, the Senate last night met and through all night into the morning because Republicans basically are just trying to gum up the works all that they can right now, which is pretty embarrassing and just sad because people are in need of this aid. We're in need of vaccines. Where state and local governments are in the need of support. But of course, the Republicans are just they're like the brave little toaster at the end of the movie where he jumps into the gears of the trash compactor. But instead of saving the master, they are just trying to, leave you and I and the rest of America out to dry. So, so the resolution in the Senate was passed by a 50-50 vote, split by Vice President Kamala Harris. Can't say it wrong. And now it's back to the House. And they voted along party lines to approve the budget. Today, they did that. And this is to move it through reconciliation. The Republicans aren't going to meet any which way near halfway with this. So it's going to be passed through budget reconciliation, through the budget committee. That's our man, Bernie Sanders, in the chair. We're going to get to him in a second. So listen to this. The rapid movement by congressional Democrats came as Biden gave his strongest criticism to date of the Republican approach to the stimulus package, suggesting further negotiations with the GOP would likely represent an unacceptable delay to critical relief. We're going to hear some see and hear Biden in a second. But it's a $1.9 trillion package, 51-50 margin it passed through. But the stimulus package would include checks up to $1,400 for low and moderate income families, extended jobless benefits, and provide $160 billion to strengthen the public health response to the pandemic, improving the vaccine distribution, and increase testing, among other measures. Now, I know the direct aid is really important. We just talked about that. But very, very important is the vaccine distribution. We're going to get to it in a minute. I have an interview with a local who received their first vaccine shot, and here on the Central Coast, and we're going to hear from him. But already the vaccine distribution site and sites in his county and the county I'm in, they're neighboring counties, of course, they have had to close these distribution centers to the people receiving their first shots because they already have a shortage because of the failure of Trump's vaccine rollout. And the Biden administration needs to play catch up, and that's why we need funding, and that's why we need this bill to move through. Frankly, it's shameful that it even has to go through reconciliation. The fact that the Republicans can't recognize the real life and death situation that we're dealing with here. We have record deaths every day, pretty much, or at least several days in a row. This last week we had record deaths, more than 4,000 in one day across the nation. The fact that they're blocking all of this stuff and just basically trying to gum up the gears or in any way that they can just goes to show you. So if people are getting mad at Democrats for not moving this along fast enough, I think that's a bad faith argument, and they're just not paying attention to how heartless and soulless the Republicans are. And remember how they acted like the pandemic wasn't really a thing, and then they said it was a Democratic hoax, and then they made face mask wearing a big macho machismo thing. I'm not weak, I'm not gonna. They made it partisan, and just helped spread, pushed reopening too soon. All these different things that they've done to exacerbate this problem shouldn't ever be forgotten. The blood's on their hands. And so this is why the vaccine is super important. Now, let's see. It says in the story here, top Democrats in both chambers say they are moving with an increased sense of urgency as the economic recovery from the pandemic continues to show signs of stalling. Meanwhile, GOP lawmakers have called for slowing down the relief effort and substantially scaling back the $1.9 trillion effort, which conservatives have derided as unnecessarily increasing the federal deficit. The Republicans care about the deficit. Again, right on cue. Sorry about that. The Republicans care about the deficit right on cue. As soon as a Democratic president's in the White House or the Democrats control Congress, that's when you can trust the Republicans to really, we got to do something about this deficit, guys. They didn't care about a deficit when they cut the tax rate on the richest Americans. Didn't care about the deficit when they approved the largest defense spending in history under Trump. There's always money for the military and all the arms contractors and different, military industrial complex companies that they love to fund. There's never not enough money for that. No. Basically, Biden and the Democrats have given up on bipartisanship with the Republican Party. This is what Biden had to say about that.
Number one of the American Rescue Plan is vaccines. Vaccines. The second, the American Rescue Plan is going to keep the commitment of $2,000. $600 has already gone out. $1,400 checks to people who need it. This is money directly in people's pockets. They need it. We need to target that money so folks making $300,000 don't get any windfall. But if you're a family that's a two-wage earner, each of the parents, one making 30 grand, one making 40 or 50, maybe that's a little more than, well, yeah, they need the money, and they're going to get it.
This is like classic Biden. You guys, you think how what was the Republican argument against Joe Biden? He has dementia. And we just heard Biden stumble over his words. The guy has a stutter. This is the other creepy thing. Just how far they've gone into kook land is, a guy with a stutter now has dementia. My grandma had dementia. This is not what dementia looks like. Now, Joe Biden is no spring chicken, but he stumbled over his words. But it's interesting how he does that, where he'll stumble over his words and then he'll hit it really hard, right? The American people need it. That's a thing that he does. But let's go back. Let's just hear a little more of what this is. Our president. It's kind of weird. There's no more Trump. This is the guy.
I won't do. I'm not cutting the size of the checks. They're going to be $1,400, period.
And again, we talked about this earlier, but Fishhead 617 is talking about this. I already talked about the 2,000. Yeah, it should be 2,000. It's a joke. It's ridiculous. Let's see. Jay in the comments says Nevada has given like $5,000 to business owners by now, $10,000 each. We have socialism in the U.S., chauvinist socialism of ownership. Yeah, I mean, the Fed can just print money all day, every day. The Fed is printing money for corporate America and for Wall Street, but try getting some of that our way. $2,000. Sure, I'll give you $1,400. Here is $1,200. I mean, I have a feeling it might even go down more. I mean, I really hope not. But let's hear a little bit more from.
That's what the American people were promised. Very quickly, here's the rest of my plan. It has money for food and nutrition so that folks don't go hungry. I think our Republican friends are going to support that. It extends unemployment insurance.
Don't think too long on that, Joe. I mean, they're okay with people starving, just like they're okay with people dying of this virus.
Which is going to run out on March 13th of this year to the end of September of this year, because we're still going to have high unemployment. It helps small businesses, thousands of whom have had to go out of business. It has money to help folks pay their health insurance. It has rental assistance to keep people in their homes rather than being thrown out on the street. It's got money to help us open our schools safely. It has money for child care, for paid leave. It gets needed resources of state and local governments to prevent layoffs of essential personnel, firefighters, nurses.
Now, he's right. All this stuff is good, but we should be real about things like the rent relief. I think the rent relief is huge, but the rent relief is also like you have to be under like the poverty limit to get it. There are lots of people who are, making. I mean, this is part of the problem of means testing, right? And if you're kind of new to politics and you don't understand what means testing is, but it's basically they're talking about means testing for the $1,400 checks. Yeah, it's ironic for him to say that's what was promised was $2,000 is what he promised. But so the means testing is if you make, I think it's 75 or it might be 50,000 now as an individual, you're going to get the $1,400. A couple needs to make 100,000 below $100,000. So they're putting a cutoff there, right? Now for rent relief, you have to be, I think it's pretty close to poverty limit or very much struggling, and you have to be able to prove that you can't pay your rent or that you can't pay your rent because of COVID. There are all these hurdles that people have to leap through to get this aid. This is why just sending checks to everybody, $2,000 checks, just makes more sense. Even if you don't need the money, and you're just going to save it or whatever. I mean, I tend to think that most people who may or may not, are more likely to hold on to it are still going to go spend money. They're going to be a little more apt to spend money they wouldn't have spent otherwise as the economy is in crisis. But also, you could just tax that money. There's ways of getting it back. So let's see. I have some comments here. Bills are due every month. Breaking up these checks is just cruel. Yeah, there's means testing. There was a tweet I saw recently that just talked about the cruelty of means testing. That and the other really idiotic thing about the 1,400 is the means testing around that is the fact that they're basing this off of your 2019 tax returns. Your 2019 taxes. Don't you think people with mass unemployment, your taxes are going to be a little, you're going to have made more money in 2019 that won't be reflective of 2020. But they're also claiming if you can get your 2020 taxes done before we, sign this into law in Congress in March, which now it's another month out till we get this aid, then, it'll be based on that income. So, this is the penchant of the centrist Democrats. Even though Joe Biden has given us a lot of things to be happy about as progressives with his executive orders, I've gone over those in previous videos. Even though he's given us some things to be happy about, he still is at heart this kind of neoliberal Reagan era dinosaur of a Democrat, where that they're going to tack to the conservative thing, which is let's put as many hurdles in the way of this aid as we can. Let's just try to kick the ball down the road as much as we can, or kick the can down, or whatever the saying is, so that, we all have to wait for this aid. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but $600 that we got in December and January is a joke. Like that. I mean, there are people who are behind months in their rent, months, and they're beginning to get evicted. People are having a rough time with this. So, it's as Jay Coleman says, the Biden word salad is bland and incremental. Yeah. And Ryan says he's single and low income. So Ryan, you're the person who could directly benefit from this. If you're struggling to pay rent, you may be able to. I mean, again, be prepared. You're going to have to jump through all these hurdles and these hoops and paperwork and all other kinds of stuff to get that. Wealth for 99 with Drew Rice. Again, go follow Drew Rice's channel, people. He says the bigger issue is that stimulus, while people absolutely need it, it will only continue increasing the value of the asset holders, landlords, which furthers the wealth gap. Exactly. So yeah, landlords. I've been hearing from landlords who, locals who are upset that, I mean, they're trying to evict people. There are ways to get around the eviction moratoriums, and they're trying to do it. Even they're trying to kick out people who who can pay, maybe just not all the back rent on time. So and Drew adds, and the means test of only giving it to people with tax returns screws over the most vulnerable people that don't even file taxes. Exactly, precisely. You know what I mean? Yeah, there are all kinds of poor people who live hand to mouth. They work under the table, undocumented people. There are all kinds of people who are not not going to get this aid, and the more hurdles they put in front of it already are a problem. But then, yeah, you have that to consider as well. Let's just hear a little more from this was last night as our new budget committee chairman, Bernard Sanders, gave a little talk about this process. And it's bittersweet, right? I'm really glad that Bernie has this power. He's now very powerful in the Senate, especially around the budget. I wonder how much he could exert his power by maybe trying to raise the stimulus amount of the stimulus money. I don't know if he can do that as the chairman. Try to throw as much in the way of the process. If, hey, let's just get these 2,000, let's increase the price. Who knows? The Democrats are already negotiating against themselves, the centrist Dems. So let's hear a little bit from Bernie Sanders. This is very clarifying. Bernie Sanders always brings it back to what's most important. And, I've had a lot of hate on my channel recently from the Jimmy Dore stands who wanted to say I worship politicians because I might say something once in a while nice about progressive Democrats, they're busy making excuses for, Republicans like Ted Cruz and Marjorie Taylor Greene, but that's neither here nor there. Bernie could have been the president, and I know it's hard for us on the left who, this was our guy, this is who we wanted in the, for the primary, to see him not in the White House right now, because it would be a whole different conversation we're having. But let's just hear what Bernie has to say about that.
Right. I think sometimes our friends in the media make the political process much more complicated than it is. And real politics in a democracy is not that complicated. What it is about is assessing the problems facing the nation and coming up with solutions to those problems. And one of the great tragedies that has occurred, in my view, in recent years is that for working class people...
Really quick, I just want to hit on that really quick. Bernie just made an insane point. Most Americans don't think that way about our government, that the government is there for them in any way at all. One of the most common things you hear from people is that it doesn't matter who you elect, the red team or the blue team, doesn't ever matter for my life, nothing gets better, right? So this is what Bernie Sanders means to me and a lot of other people I know, which is just that he kind of opened our eyes to a type of politics that is very humanistic. It's humanism at its heart, where it's about people. You know, it's about, like he says, the poor and working people of this country, right? It's always who he centers in not just his rhetoric, but in his policy. So let's just hear a little bit more of that. I just wanted to make that point. Whoops. Okay.
Middle-class people, lower-income people, these are folks who, in a variety of ways, are hurting and have hurt for many, many years. Wages in this country have been stagnant for decades. Young people are finding it increasingly difficult to go to college. 90 million Americans are uninsured or underinsured.
Now that's an ad that's starting, but yeah, and there he is. He's just centering the conversation over what matters, and he talks about how much these checks are going to matter for people. Ryan here said, yes, and I did benefit from the $600. I did not. Also, I did not fall short on my rent. I got my taxes done. So doesn't a working person need to file taxes without owing money to the IRS? Yeah, of course. But there are lots of people who just don't file their taxes, Ryan, and they they don't all get investigated by the IRS because they make so little. It doesn't make sense for the IRS to investigate them. So if people, I mean, I've been behind on my taxes before, like a year or more, and so that's what there are people who aren't going to get this aid because of that. They might be late on their taxes. Maybe they didn't file. Andy says, I just learned the Brazilian big bird is terrifying. Want me to send you a picture? Sure, man. Send me a picture. We might not get to it this second. But Bernie also said something about bipartisanship. Let's see if I can get to that. Because this is what the Republicans are hitting hard.
I think for my Republican friends here to be talking about the need for bipartisanship, which all of us support. But the reality is they used exactly the same process to pass, or at least try to pass, major pieces of legislation.
He's talking about reconciliation.
So, Mr. President, all that I want to say is that we are living in an unprecedented moment in American history. And again, it is quite likely that this Congress today, President Biden, are facing more serious crises than any president, certainly since FDR, maybe going back to Abraham Lincoln, have faced. We got a healthcare crisis, we got a pandemic, we got an economic meltdown, we got an education crisis, we got an infrastructure crisis, we got a criminal justice crisis, we got an immigration crisis, you name it, we got it. And either we are going to have the courage to address those problems or we're not. And I think now is the time to do it. So we certainly look forward to support from our Republican colleagues. But what is most important is that at a time of massive pain and anxiety, this Congress acts boldly on behalf of working families. For too long, we have seen the Congress give tax breaks to billionaires.
Yeah.
We have seen lobbyists.
Bernie's hitting the greatest hits real quick. We know what he's going to tell us there, and he's absolutely right. And this is, again, like, I think it's really something that Bernie is in this position. I know he didn't win the primary, and that's devastating for us, but he's in this position, a very powerful position, to pressure and push the Biden administration left and in his direction. And in a lot of ways, we've already seen that. And not this COVID stimulus, but the next one they want to do, the more economic stimulus than the direct COVID. They're going to have the $15 minimum wage in there. Or it might be in this one, I can't remember. But so they're going to have the $15 minimum wage. Nobody was talking about that really in the primary except for Bernie Sanders. That's a Bernie Sanders policy. That's now the Democratic Party's policy. Okay, so I think we gotta, let's all, be sad. It should have been you, Bernie. It should have been you, but at the same time, let's keep our eyes on the prize here and realize that, that it's going to take more than an election or two to pull the Democratic Party in the direction we want. We've already made a lot of progress. Jay here and Drew in the comments make really good point. Jay Coleman says political nihilism benefits the ruling class. Exactly. And Drew says absolutely. Idealist bomb throwing only hurts pushes for substantive material change. Absolutely. And this is what I think Bernie understands, and this is what the Jimmy Dore people don't understand, is that Bernie, I know Bernie wants it to be $2,000 checks. Bernie wants it to be $2,000 checks every month. That's what he's been pushing for since the beginning of this thing. He basically went full Andrew Yang UBI on this thing, on COVID, basically. So that's where Bernie would like it to be. But, you know, as the chairman of the budget committee, Bernie has to make it move. Whatever he's getting, he needs to make it move. But he's already helped pull that and push that into so much more than it could have been already, than what the Democrats would have gone with. You know, and I also think it is a credit to who Joe Biden has surrounded himself with, because of the progressive voting bloc that showed up for him, you know, and there's something to be said for us being loud about what we want and what we demand. There's something to be said for how much we were in the streets over the summer. You know, I did live coverage of Black Lives Matter and all of that. And, you know, just the sheer numbers, and the sheer numbers in the election, you know, millions and millions of more people voted for Biden. And that's a mandate. You know, that, I mean, it was a landslide, and it was a mandate to, you know, be bold and get us the hell out of this crisis.